It's great to be back here with folks at Angel Beat. And today I'm here with my colleague, Coan Dillahunty, to talk about how to accelerate exiting the data center with application and file server migration to the cloud. So let me just start. I'm Anne Blanchard, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Nasuni, and Coan Dillahunty is our Principal Product Manager. So welcome, Coan.
Hi.
Great.
Nice to meet everyone.
We can hear you great. That's wonderful. Little bit of background on Nasuni and our offering and our architecture. Essentially, we are a cloud-native file server. We're a global file server that resides actually in the cloud, and there's no hardware associated with the file system itself, which really means it has no limits in terms of how many files we can hold, how many file size we can hold, how many locations we can support. It's an extremely scalable file server architecture, essentially. So what Nasuni does is provide file storage based in object storage, but we do a lot more than that because of the capabilities that the cloud gives us. We have a backup included in the product, disaster recovery included in the product, file synchronization included in the product. So Nasuni truly offers a global file system, which allows so many of our customers to get out of all the siloed file data that they have either in their data centers or throughout the entire organization. We have two really important points that we want to make through this presentation. I'm going to let Coan kind of dwell on them because if you take nothing else away from our talk and our case study we're going to talk about today, it's these points that Coan and I want to communicate.
So when you're working with mainframe and legacy applications, file storage may not always be a concern. It may just be a database and application layer, but frequently we deal with applications that have a lot of unstructured file data with them as well. And so you might be presenting storage to those applications using NFS or SMB protocol. And in that case, using Nasuni, it's actually possible to elevate those applications to the cloud because we write directly the object store. So while you're refactoring your apps or moving them to the cloud, it's possible to allow access to what is effectively really in the cloud, even though it's on-prem. And so by virtue of being able to write to cloud storage from on-prem applications, you have hybrid access to data. So you're reading and writing to those files locally, but they're also available for the cloud of your choice to consume them. And it's as easy as spinning up a Nasuni Edge appliance at another location, another cloud region to consume your data. And that really gives you flexibility that you never had with legacy or mainframe applications. And as we go through the presentation, we'll show some more of those benefits.
Most of us, when we think about mainframe storage, we think big iron, but honestly, object storage is the new data center storage. And I think we're hearing that from virtually every presentation that we're hearing this afternoon or this morning. We see a tremendous migration to the public cloud. That being said, there are still many companies that are choosing a private cloud option, but regardless, they're moving their data center storage piece by piece into object storage. And this has a lot of advantages in terms of cost, redundancy, durability, and even performance, but also scalability. If you take the advantages of traditional file server storage with, as Coan mentioned, CIFS and NFS and SMB protocol access, along with some of the disadvantages, which is that a lot of file server storage is hardware-based and is expensive and requires, ancillary services like backup and DR, and compare them with object storage, they both have advantages and disadvantages. Object storage, you have to access, it's up in the cloud. There could be a latency problem. There's no protocol support. In fact, it continues to be fairly poor protocol support, even when object storage vendors try to offer it. No built-in backup or versioning. But as I said, the advantages are it's inexpensive, it's super scalable, geo-replication, lots of great reasons to try and put your file storage in object storage. And that's essentially what we do at Nasuni. So we take the advantages of file server storage with all of the protocol access and the preservation of your current file system structure, but we combine it with an inexpensive backend that's highly scalable, durable, and ready to kind of be located wherever your applications and users need that storage. Coan and I are going to talk about a very powerful case study that he was personally involved in, and we'll start by introducing his former employer, TBWA. He's going to tell you a little bit about the company that he used to work for and where he was a key technical director in their data center.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, before coming over to Nasuni to work in product management, I worked in North American operations for TBWA and headed the organization and led our data center consolidation initiative and was the global storage lead for that project as well. So we had 11,000 people, 275 offices across 95 countries. I'd say each of those offices, believe it or not, had applications and storage use cases in all of those locations that had to move to the cloud. In addition, there's different business units, autonomous entities with different technology, history, and timelines. So really mergers and acquisitions dating back, 20 or 30 years, but operating as part of one company with all those technologies fitting together in one bucket. And on top of that, we were part of Omnicom, the world's largest advertising agency conglomerate, with several other divisions that had just as many people. And to give you an idea of our global clients, you could imagine their requirements and global distribution. We only had all of those offices because all of those global brands, marketed in all those locations and had requirements for data locality and availability in all those geographies as well.
So Coan, I know when you and I first met, which was over 4 years ago, TBWA was just embarking on a cloud initiative for the data center infrastructure. And let's tell the audience a little bit about what was behind that.
Sure. So it started off as a cloud first initiative that became an all-in cloud initiative where everything needed to move to the cloud. So beginning, any new project would go to the cloud. And in terms of storage, it meant that we couldn't have tape backup anymore. We couldn't count on the existing data protection and storage strategy that we had. So all of our NAS storage, all of our block storage, all had to go away, and we had to find a way to do that. And object storage ended up being a great solution for that. Although object storage on its own couldn't do that. That's why Nasuni came into the equation and what we needed to do. But we did this to reduce costs, to get better manageability. And a big reason for us was security, because all of those on-prem installations across those 265 offices, you could imagine all had, different patch levels, different security postures, different lists of administrators. We didn't have any central visibility or discoverability, or even something as basic as data protection, encrypting the data at rest and in transit. If a customer came to us and had an RFP asking for that capability, could we deliver that? And in most cases, the answer was no, or we'd have to carve out a one-off solution in order to do that. And with the cloud and Nasuni, we were able to find a solution that could handle that. And just an example here of data center operations and all the things that go into storage. I think we're all probably familiar with storage and the different things you had to deal with in the old world with, primary storage servers, backup, MPLS networks to fit it all together, somebody driving a truck with tapes, all those good things that we don't want to deal with anymore. So can talk a little bit about the headaches of application migration and how we solve that. So, Anne?
Sure. So I was listening earlier, and obviously, refactoring, rewriting applications is a major undertaking. But as we saw, it can take years. And I know from hearing about your project, Coan, that you just did not have years to get this cloud initiative underway, to get these costs under control and achieve kind of the cloud objectives. So tell us a little bit about what requirements you had to meet while, obviously keeping the business running and moving all of this infrastructure to the cloud.
So all of that legacy infrastructure, we needed to keep it running and at the same time move it to the cloud and meet new security requirements. So, winning a new piece of business, suddenly needing to expand that application to another geography, while at the same time taking this cloud initiative into account was really challenging. So how could we do that? How could you have the same performance if you're moving data to another region and introducing latency?
I
That's
think
almost nonsensical.
I think that's a picture of you in a former life, right?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Trying to figure out all those things and keeping the lights on. Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about the approach that you took, because obviously it couldn't just be willy-nilly, disorganized kind of approach. What sort of system did you adopt to accomplish this transition?
Sure. We started with an application inventory process that, when we dug into it with our vendors and consultants, looked like it might be a multi-year project on its own. But we classified and rationalized those applications, putting them into different buckets, whether it's cloud native, whether it's legacy, the kind of storage, the interdependencies between all those systems, and understanding those. So after we did that, we then came up with a model architecture for each of them, whether it was a lift and shift or refactoring, all those things. And then after looking at that, in terms of storage and where Nasuni came into play, how would we handle storage? Could we utilize cloud native storage from day one? Could it be a long-term goal? Would it benefit with a hybrid strategy for the short term and maybe long term? And then based on that, put those together in some standard building blocks for applications. Application pattern A, we're going to go to the cloud first. It's going to immediately shift over. If it's hybrid, let's come up with a model that lets it run on-prem, but also exposes it to the cloud so we can start to take advantages of the cloud and not need to immediately cut over, so we can take advantage of those things. And really working from that inventory and backlog and just churning through that list was the way that we were successful in moving those file-based applications to the cloud.
So after this categorization, you were able to kind of have a different model depending on what the strategy was going to be for each application.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So why don't we look at the results? Now here we are 5 years later, and TBWA has been moving to the cloud, and let's talk about what you and I have seen, still working with TBWA very closely in terms of overall migration to the cloud.
Yeah, so those on-prem storage silos, the big block NAS arrays went away and have been reduced with local edge caches powered by Nasuni. So consuming that data locally, end users and applications in a lot of cases really continued to access data in the same way, although the data was protected in the cloud. And then at the same time, the tape backup and replication systems went away, being replaced by a continuously versioned global file system provided by Nasuni. Further, those local data repositories were no longer local. So, one office working on an advertising campaign for a big brand suddenly no longer needed to ship files between locations because they were stored in the cloud. They could be consumed from any location, and we could even lock those files and collaborate across locations, just as if we really had a global network putting it all together. In many cases, we didn't. Internet and access to the cloud was the only backbone that we had. And then at the same time, we got into this and we're looking at object storage or centralizing applications in the data center or in a particular geography, and that just didn't work. We had to turn back and really figure out how that would work locally, because performance suffered. We were frequently working on large files and applications, and we just couldn't wait 30 minutes or hours to upload and download files. We needed WAN native speeds and do that, and that's what Nasuni offered. And we started at 30 pilot sites and quickly rolled that out to 100, and now at over 150 today, all sharing that same data, the same paths, the same applications. Didn't really have to dig into this data. I mean, how could you dig through 10 petabytes of data? and deal with that and manage everything in that regard. You really need something flexible, and Nasuni proved to do that. And then at the same time, I never really thought it would work out this way, but our CISO became an advocate for the storage solution because of the strong built-in encryption in the system. That, you know, if all of a sudden we could have a compliant storage solution that encrypted the data and made sure that we could check a box on the RFP, it made a big difference in that regard. Plus, we could target any geography. So if we had a big Spanish bank come on board, for example, we could use object storage in Spain. We could use on-prem object stores if we wanted to, yet still share that across locations and do it non-disruptively. Having all locations get in and access the data, it really went a long way to moving us to the cloud and allowed us to focus on what, you know, really were the thornier migration issues with the cloud, getting the team schooled up and developing new tooling and everything else. Just having a storage application that was cloud native and flexible for the cloud moved us to the cloud much more rapidly than we thought we could.
No, it's a really impressive migration to the cloud, and like you said, it allowed you know, operations to continue throughout, while, you know, dramatically reducing costs and simplifying the whole structure and allowing that data center consolidation to happen, you know, from a footprint perspective and from a file server storage perspective. And then of course Nasuni got the best benefit, which was having you come join us. So we're basically want to communicate that you know, there's a lot of pain that we hear from customers around this particular piece of data center migration to the cloud or data center downsizing, which is, it's all around the files and the file servers. How are we going to do this without compromising performance? So I think, Coan, you've got some tips here for folks that are wanting to do this in kind of an orderly way and think through it so that there's no disruption to end users.
Yeah, and these are the typical things you hear from vendors around applications and cloud migration. I'd say the unique piece here is the storage strategy and understanding how that fits in. It might be number, you know, 3, 4, 5, or 6 on your list, but it's really important in how you move to the cloud. And just having a single vendor or single point solution for storage alone, you're really limited. You can be really limited in what you do. So Nasuni, something that allows you to extend, you know, native file server protocols like NFS and SMB and providing backup in the location, really allows you to have a building block you wouldn't normally have in the cloud, and it goes a long way. Just, you know, being able to count on that and extend it. We have customers, you know, using that for cross-cloud, cross-location capabilities, and flexibility is the key in whatever you do with the cloud. Just that one long pole in the tent makes things so much harder. And, you know, identifying and, you know, having those tools, but then having some get out of jail free cards in terms of how you move and how you scale can really make a big difference. And that's where Nasuni fits in.
Now, subsequent to the TBWA Nasuni migration with mostly their data center file server storage, a client of TBWA's also went through a similar data center downsizing. And again, as they said to us, the file servers were the drag on the whole operation. But once they realized they could basically preserve their performance and get the benefits of the cloud scalability, they were able to kind of accelerate a really dramatic downsizing of their data centers as well.